The Affordable Care Acts Medicaid expansion was a big winner tonight. Voters in Maine approved a ballot measure to participate in the expansion, and Democrats' significant gains in Virginia improved the odds it will expand the program, too. What's next? Although Maine voters signed off on Medicaid expansion last night, some advocates expect Gov. Paul Lepage to drag his feet until he leaves office next year, pushing the actual implementation of tonight's referendum to his successor. In Virginia, Democrats romp through the House of Delegates, where the policy died under Gov. Terry McAuliffe, will make Medicaid expansion significantly more likely. New York City's mayor, Democrat Bill de Blasio, was elected to a second term Tuesday, beating Republican opponent Nicole Maliotakis after leading her by over 40 points in recent polls. Big-name Democrats Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren campaigned and fundraised for de Blasio, but he was almost guaranteed to keep his seat in a city where Democrats outnumber Republicans nearly 7-1. Rome is also one of several Democrats who unseated Republicans in races for the Virginia state legislature, a shocking outcome that could see Democrats become the majority party in the chamber. Go deeper. Democrat Ralph Northam wins the race for Virginia governor. A tweet from President Trump 30 minutes after Democrat Ralph Northam was declared the winner in Virginia, and minutes before his address from South Korea. This is another sign that Trump takes these results personally, particularly with cable news coverage focusing on his impact on this race. Worth noting, Gillespie did embrace some of Trump's platform, making immigration and crime key tenets of his pitch to voters and campaigning more as a populist than the D.C. insider he is. Democrat Phil Murphy, a former Goldman Sachs executive, is the next governor of New Jersey. He beat out Chris Christie's Lieutenant Governor, Kim Godogno. Christie's rock-bottom approval ratings 15% as of July certainly didn't help in what proved a comfortable win for the Democrats. There are now 13 Republicans departing in 2018 and just one Democrat. In addition, Jason Chaffetz resigned his seat in June, and his replacement is being elected Tuesday. Outlier check 1. According to Brookings, the average term served for retiring members has hovered around 8 over the last 40 years, but dropped to 5 in the 2016 cycle. The average among these 13 Republicans is 9.3. Outlier check 2. The number to watch for to help determine if this trend is notable is 23. That's the average number of retiring representatives over the last 5 election cycles. Over that time, there has been more attrition from Republicans than from Democrats. However, the 12-to-1 ratio of retiring Republicans to Democrats is a considerable disparity. A look at the 13 departing Republicans. Ted Poe of Texas State announced November 7 terms 72,016 margin of victory 25 points 2016 presidential Trump by 9 points Frank Lobiano of New Jersey date announced November 7 terms 122,016 margin of victory 22 points 2016 presidential Trump by 5 points Lamar Smith of Texas State announced November 2 terms 15 2016 margin of victory 31 points 2016 presidential Trump by 10 points Jeb Hensarling of Texas State announced October 31 terms 8 2016 margin of victory 61 points 2016 presidential Trump by 28 points Pat Tiberi of Ohio date announced October 19 terms 9 2016 margin of victory 37 points 2016 presidential Trump by 11 points Tim Murphy of Pennsylvania resigned in scandal date announced October 5 terms 7 full terms 2016 margin of victory uncontested 2016 presidential Trump by 20 points Dave Pratt of Michigan date announced Sept. 11 terms 2 2016 margin of victory 13 points 2016 presidential Trump by 5 points Charlie Dent of Pennsylvania date announced September 7 terms 7 2016 margin of victory 20 points 2016 presidential Trump by 8 points Dave Reichert of Washington date announced September 6 terms 7 2016 margin of victory 20 points 2016 presidential Clinton by 3 points John J. Duncan Jr. of Tennessee date announced July 31 terms 15 full terms 2016 margin of victory 51 points 2016 presidential Trump by 35 points Ileana Ros-Lehtinen of Florida date announced April 30 terms 14 full terms 2016 margin of victory 10 points 2016 presidential Clinton by 20 points date announced January 25 terms 5 2016 margin of victory 28 points 2016 presidential Trump by 19 points date announced January 6 terms 13 full terms 2016 margin of victory 27 points 2016 presidential Trump by 14 points after being forced to turn back by weather on the first attempt. The president waited an hour to try again before the trip was called off. Sanders told reporters WH officials were hoping the fog would clear. South Korean President Moon was to join Trump on the visit, which Sanders called a historic moment because it may have represented the first time the U.S. and South Korean presidents had visited the DMZ together. The Senate's Republican leadership is considering changing the House GOP's tax plan to include a one-year delay in slashing the corporate tax rate, The Washington Post reports. Such a delay would save $100 billion, but could be resisted by President Trump, who has pushed for an immediate tax break for companies. Other proposed changes include retaining 7 tax brackets, instead of the 4 presented by the House, and eliminating state and local tax deductions for families. Go deeper. Winners and losers from the House GOP tax plan. President Trump addressed the shooting from Japan and said it was not a guns situation, instead calling mental health the problem. He ordered that American flags flown at the White House, all public buildings and grounds, and military posts be flown at half-staff through sunset on Thursday. The investigation on Monday, FBI investigators flew Kelly's phone to headquarters in Quantico, Virginia after they were unable to get into the device to access information that may be key in deciphering his motives. Law enforcement officials recovered the suspect's rifle from the scene of the crime as well as 2 handguns from his car. All of the weapons, including a 4th, were purchased by the suspect himself, and all were purchased after his conviction. There is video recording from inside the church that investigators have collected and reviewed. The suspect, Kelly, was a resident of the neighboring county and served in the Air Force from 2010 to 2014, who left with a bad conduct discharge and was sentenced to a year's confinement for the assault, per the LA Times. Investigators said there was a domestic situation going on between the suspect and his in-laws, and Kelly's grandmother-in-law was among the people he gunned down at the church, CNN reports. Kelly also expressed anger at his mother-in-law before the shooting, investigators said. He reportedly sent her messages that investigators will be able to view if they can access information on his phone. Authorities have confirmed that the shooting was not linked to race or religion, and the FBI does not have a terrorism investigation open at this time. The timeline: the church service began at 11 a.m. Sunday morning. At 11:20 a.m., Kelly was spotted at a gas station near the church. He was dressed in black and wearing tactical gear, including a ballistic vest. Shortly after, at about 11:30 a.m., he crossed the street to the church and began shooting at it, using a Ruger AR-15, similar to a military rifle. He then moved to the right side of the church and kept shooting, before entering the church to open fire inside. When the suspect exited the church, a local man, who was armed, confronted him and shot him twice, once in the arm and once in the leg. At that point, the suspect dropped his weapon and fled in his vehicle. A second local man, Johnny Langendorf, was driving by when he saw the encounter between Kelly and the resident, according to local TV station KSAT. The 2 men chased after Kelly in Langendorf's car until the suspect ran into a ditch. During the chase, which lasted about 11 miles, Kelly used his cell phone to call his father and notify him that he had been shot and probably would not make it, per investigators. Law enforcement later arrived and found Kelly dead inside his vehicle, killed by a self-inflicted gunshot to the head, per investigators. The victims of the shooting at First Baptist Church range in age from 18 months to 77 years old, and include the pastor's 14-year-old daughter. Nearly everyone had some type of injury and about half of those killed were children, Sheriff Joe Tackett said. The deceased include at least 8 members of a single family, CNN reports. A pregnant woman and 3 of her children were killed along with her brother-in-law, his child and additional members of their family. The visiting pastor leading the service was also gunned down. There were 20 people wounded and taken to local hospitals after the attack, including 6 in stable condition, 4 in serious condition and 10 in critical condition. The death count may rise, authorities said. Of the deceased, 23 people were killed inside the church, 2 died outside and 1 person died at the hospital. How to help: officials are setting up 2 bank accounts, including one with Wells Fargo, to collect donations for the victims and their families. Sutherland Springs is a small town in South Texas, about 35 miles east of San Antonio. Parishioners present at the First Baptist Church's Sunday service, when the shooter attacked, were likely all members of Sutherland Springs' small community of around 700 people. About 4% of them were gunned down Sunday morning. The local community center has been turned into a resource center for families of the victims to wait for information. This was the worst church shooting in U.S. history and the deadliest mass shooting in Texas history. Go deeper: the victims of the attack, the deadliest mass shootings in modern U.S. history. This one is tied for the 4th spot.